Well, one of the things that's sort of interesting about just that whole question in color and shining is that, Bob, in your works, the word for a given color almost never appears in that color.
Yeah.
And there's some kind of tension that you're creating with that. And I'm curious as to how you're feeling that, whether that's a resistance between the two, between the physical word and the color in your head, or you're just playing with our poor victimized minds.
Well, it seems there was that distinction in Williams between copying nature and presenting. He wants to avoid description. That's in Spring and All, which is always one of my lodestars. And if you use the color red to write the color red, that to me seems like it's descriptive. And I'm borrowing from the accident of the color of the material of the pens some sense of meaning that the words themselves ought to convey or impart or create. So I do try to avoid it, but then when you can write, I think that one that Steve read, something or other, something green,
Mm-hmm.
one of those greens is green.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's a eureka moment.
Pretty exciting. Yeah.
But especially if you try to avoid it, and it happens anyway.
Huh.
And sometimes it happens because you run out of, you've used all the other colors and you just don't have any choice. But I do try to avoid that. I think it's cheap. Cheap. I wish this. Hmm?
Do you ever have any kind of
Oh yeah, I got a system.
for like which color comes next?
Well, if you look at these, mostly, yeah, we could talk about. There are 4 colors: red. What are they? Red,
green,
black is a
yellow.
color, and,
Black and
and blue. Right. And so one, I've developed.
Page is white.
A page is white. Oh yeah. And then the black, the notebooks are black on the outside. And if you start with blue, you try to avoid writing blue again on that page. So this one would say blue, black, green, red. On the other side, it's red, green, black, blue.
Oh, inverse, mirror.
And then
Is that how they appear on the pen, the things that you click on the top? Is that the order they're in?
no,
No.
these
No?
are separate pens.
Oh, they are separate pens.
And then you.
There's no clicking, they're black.
So I remember when we taught, when you visited Stephen's class, when I was in his class years ago, you were using one of those pens with the multiple colors.
But they're more like this,
top.
except thicker. Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't
No?
remember that.
Maybe
They've been all
maybe
the-
I imagined
they've
that.
been all
Maybe
the-
I was imitating you with one
You
of those
imagined
pens.
Yeah, maybe so. So then,
You
you
got
know,
space.
this page is a mirror image of the order of that page. And on the next page, well, you can start over again. You try not to repeat either vertically or horizontally the color, just as a way of keeping everything equal and making the whole page itself an organized object rather than relying on, again, the redness of redness to convey anything and the blueness of blueness. So then one gets into, a number of these are, I don't know what they call that in the Middle Ages, some kind of you have panels, what's it? Diptych, yeah, and then there's a four-ditch. Quadraditch? No, there's a triptych.
Triptych.
But what's four-ditch? Quadrich? Why not? And so you could set them up in space and at some size as panels, and the colors could interact with each other and bring each other alive in a way. I want to do this. I would need to. I'd like to. I have a scanner, and I want to get a decent Epson printer at some point somehow, so I can produce these images and present the work in a way that the colors stand forth and are equal in that kind of possible space.
You and Steve both use the space of the page quite differently, even though you both use it quite consciously. I mean, when you were younger, and working on sentences,
Yeah.
you used a Courier font throughout that book. And I know
Yeah.
I don't know whether Michael Waltuck scanned that in or retyped it for the online version, but there's a sort of that equal weight to every letter is clearly a feature of that. Now, and that's what I see in Steve's use of Courier as well, or in Larry Eigner's, although the lines
Although
are quite variable.
it's true, and we both, Bob's a little older than I am, but we both grew up with typewriters and so on. So that was, and actually Robert Duncan's groundwork, or whatever when he
first volume.
yeah, when he published those with New Directions and he insisted on Courier, I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. But you know, the equal spacing of letters is in Bob's work is much more crucial than in mine. But what I pay attention to is what the right and left margins are doing, so that these poems create visual shapes on the page.
The length of the line is a unit, really.
It's the,
Whereas-
in a way, the length of the line is unit. Yeah.
Where Bob's works now, these pieces that he was showing us last night, the first lines are, the words on the first lines are much more compact than the elongated words in the last line
That's true.
on each page. And
Often.
it's consistent throughout the entire
Yeah.
manuscript.
Yeah.
But looked at another way, you could say that
that's
Bob
true.
has moved from
True.
non-proportional spacing in sentences to this super proportional spacing.
Yeah.
He's gone back to proportional.
He's gone right. He's
Oh.
gotten the selector.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's really the page becomes the object one has both in mind and before one. You're working in the space of the page rather than any predetermined unit, size of the letter, equivalence of the letter. How do these marks
So it's less about fitting the marks
Occur.
onto the page.
How do the marks
and-
occur? And then once you've made marks, the other marks relate to the previous marks, so that you act within the space of the page. And all of these marks, you can look at them sideways or upside down. You can see that they're in some related pattern to each other, and that changes depending upon how it goes in the beginning. But the beginning determines what you can do next.
But you
And-
make stringent,
Huh?
you make stringent evaluations, value judgments on some as more successful than others, based on spacing, choice of words. So last night there was one
Yeah.
that made you particularly unhappy
Yeah, well, that was because of a statement, and it was
because of what the word
false.
said.
You didn't like
Yeah,
the
it said
content.
the beans-
It was the
Wrong, but there's
content,
some
not
other
the
the.
beans
pages
felt
where you
the
admire
frost
how
coming.
You used the canvas because there are a lot. You're thinking about 4 or 5 things at once, and when they all get pulled off, you are happy, and when they don't
Yeah.
get pulled off, you say, well, that's not a good one. Am I
Actually,
right?
that's if I'm happy, and I admit to being happy, and I really do like doing this kind of stuff. My partner Susie says that she writes when she's unhappy. She's motivated by some condition or fact or injustice that she's going to write against or toward. But the condition in this work is one of some happiness.